All right, welcome back, guys. Today I have Tia with me. Would you go ahead and introduce yourself?
So my name is Tia Jensen, and I'm a neuro-compassionate coach specializing in working with people who have ADHD or exhibit similar symptoms. And I teach tools and techniques to help individuals love and work with their unique brains.
And this is going to be like live and happening now because Tia and I, although we've coached together in Coach It Forward, which you guys hear me talk about on the podcast because I absolutely love it. But that's where I get coached. That's where I coach people. I coached somebody this morning from Coach It Forward, actually. But Tia and I have gotten to know each other a little bit there and found out she was an ADHD coach and just had to get her on to talk about our tools and techniques. So that is what this episode is going to be for you guys. It's going to be learning from two different ADHD coaches. And Tia and I, although we've coached together, we've not actually talked about ADHD coaching. So just a little bit before the recording. So this is going to be fun. We're going to be learning together. So what would you say is one of your best ADHD tools that you work with clients?
Mm. So, you say one, and as an ADHD person, my brain's giving me all the things. I'm like, what do you mean there's one? Uh, but that being said, I love meditation for emotional self-regulation. And
Mm.
also, I'm a positive intelligence coach. And so I use that program largely to help people with both um, rewiring their neural pathways and also just establishing a, a baseline to help them focus and have emotional self-regulation.
Okay, so getting ADHD people to slow down as a hyperactive, I'm like, meditation?
I know. And I did the same thing. Trust me. I'm like, what do you mean? And I'm not, my hyperactivity is all up here. I mean, I do fidget, but I I grew up not knowing I had ADHD. Nobody would have pegged me as ADHD because I am more the traditional female version of a dreamer, maybe off in my own thoughts or whatever, that even though they're going 60,000 miles per hour.
Yeah, what used to be ADD.
Yes, absolutely. And when I got diagnosed as an adult, which it's a crazy story, but anyway, and it was with ADD. And then I don't know, a decade or so later, I went to the Amen Clinic and got brain scans and learned so much more about it.
Yeah.
But I can't even tell you how meditation came into my sphere of influence. I think I got a book from the library. I know an audio book, you know. It was probably no, it was in meditation before then. Anyway, neither here nor there. The first time I sat to do it, I just told myself 2 minutes. 2 minutes. I'm just going to sit for
Mm.
2 minutes. And before this happened, I had taken many yoga classes. And so I understood the concept of when thoughts come to let them go. I understood it logically, but not practically.
Yeah.
And so I literally started out with 2 minutes practicing, and it was the most imperfect practice ever. But what I learned was as I practiced, it evolved. And so I try to share that with people. We have this idea that you're going to have to sit in lotus position and put your fingers together and that is a type of meditation, but that's not the only type of meditation. And it's huge to distinguish that because my meditation doesn't look like that at all.
Yeah, I love hearing that. So have you heard of walking meditation?
Oh, yeah, I do those.
Okay. How does that work exactly? Tell us.
So, once again, I practice two different types. So I can practice without any auditory input. And I also have been known to practice with auditory input where I'm listening to something labeled as a walking meditation. And so, what you're doing when you're doing a walking meditation is you're both moving and also focusing on like the feelings in your body. You might be focusing on
Mm.
the muscles in your feet as you're walking across the pavement or the grass, wherever you are. And you might move to the sensations in your legs. Meanwhile, for someone with ADHD, particularly, thoughts are always hitting us, right? And
Yeah.
so it's an opportunity to acknowledge the thought and to just choose to go back to a focus if you're doing like body focus as you're walking. I've also done the type where I might just be walking and choosing to notice things around me, so outside of my body. I particularly love clouds. So I love looking at cloud formations.
Mm,
And the goal for me is to not have thoughts or judgments about the clouds, if that's my focus, but to
interesting.
notice colors and textures. It's amazing how many shades are in a cloud. We think of clouds, white, fluffy things.
Yeah.
So many shades of gray. There's so many shapes in the different styles of clouds. And so it's a focusing on something other than what's flowing through my mind. And it allows my mind a sense of rest. It's not 100% at rest. It doesn't mean things aren't coming at me mentally, because they are, but it's a choosing to purposefully acknowledge and let it go. So I might, if I'm having like some circumstance that feels stressful, I might have thoughts continually hit me about that circumstance. And I'm like, oh, yeah, yeah, this is not the time for that. And I let it go.
Yeah.
And it's
It
just
seems
nice
like
to
it would
have.
really, yeah, it seems like it would really help impulsive behavior. If you can have a thought and let it go, that
Yes.
would help extremely. So, what was the other thing you said? Intelligent design?
Oh, so no, Positive Intelligence Program.
Positive
It's
intelligence.
a program that was created by Shirzad Sharmin and originally started out with like business. Well, no, let me back up. Originally started out in a college campus
Mm,
and grew into a lot of corporate communities use it. And in the past, I want to say 4 or 5 years, it's now branched out into the world in general. So there's coaches that
okay.
are using it for all sorts of things. And I just happen to choose to use it for ADHD.
Oh, and how does it help with ADHD?
Well, for one thing, it helps to rewire neural pathways, which sounds really big. And the first time I was exposed to it, I'm like, no way, no way. And so I actually um, went through the program for a time and I left it. And then it came back into my sphere of influence, and I just knew I was supposed to do it. It's one of the first times I ever had like an intuition knowing that I was confident 100% about.
Mm,
And so it helps to, it's kind of like a gym. So, we go to the gym to build our muscles because we want to change the shape of our body or maybe our strength. And it's the same type of thing, except for it's a mental gym. So you're building mental resilience and you're changing from a reactive mindset to a purposeful mindset. So it has a lot of implications. It can help with your well-being. It helps boost productivity. It helps in relationships. So it's practical across all areas of your life, which is probably one of my
mm.
favorite things about it.
And are these like recordings that you're listening to, or how does this work?
Excellent question. So there is an initial 7-week program, and it has an app, and there are modules within the app. So it's pretty much intended to be the first 7 weeks to be an intense boot camp. So I use that as my initial piece of my program, and then follow with my practices. And so it's about an hour video a week, but it's now broken up. I think they heard from the neurodivergent community. So it's broken up into pieces. So you don't have to sit for one whole hour in one sitting, right? And
Love
I love
that.
that. Um, and so you'll have a video to watch. In the app, you have a daily focus. And then there's 2 different times during the day where you come back to the daily focus and help practice what you learned in your daily focus. And so, like, for instance, this week, my daily focus has been things like loving yourself, loving others. Daily focus is like dropping judgment. Anyway, you've got 7 weeks of a daily focus doing that. And then there
Yeah.
is a continuing program following that.
I could see how that revisiting twice a day would really like lock things in.
Yeah,
Is that how?
absolutely. And sometimes, what I like to tell anyone, not just my clients, everything is a practice. And so we get to practice these things. So for a lot of my clients, the first time they're getting into this, they're not perfect about getting the entire video done for the week. They're not perfect about being in for their daily focus and both following practices. And it takes some time to develop habits. And sometimes we have to allow ourselves to let it go and accept what is. So
Mm,
if a person only gets in the daily practice for that first week or the daily focus, pardon me, then I'm like, I celebrate that because that's more
yeah,
than you did last week, right? But
absolutely.
yes, the reinforcement of the extra practices during the day, I think, has been huge for a lot of people.
Yeah, I love that celebrating the wins. That's what I do with my clients as well. Like, let's
Yeah,
celebrate every little thing that goes right. And we
absolutely.
don't do that for ourselves. You need a coach almost to I mean, the people I'm running into anyway aren't doing it for themselves. What's been your experience?
Oh, that's absolutely my experience personally, as well as with the clients once I became an ADHD coach. It's some of that I think is the way we've been raised. I don't think many of us were taught to celebrate our wins, and especially not if they were small. At least my household, it was like the big things were worth celebrating, right? And I don't fault my parents for that. I think we're all a generation of the previous generation, and so we're learning as we go, and I think we're now as a society starting to understand the importance of celebrating all the wins, not just the big ones.
Yeah. I mean, our brain is always offering us what we're doing wrong and the
Always.
negative.
uh,
And that just happens automatically. We don't even have to concentrate on that whatsoever. But concentrating on the good things. And I have clients kind of pull back and almost go, oh no, like that's nothing. And I'm like, no, that's something.
yeah,
You did like you said, you did more than you did last week.
yeah.
And I just find that with my clients, they start getting really proud of themselves when we're celebrating the wins. And so that's everything, right?
It is everything because, like you mentioned, our brain is always going to offer the negative, and
Mhm.
unless we are purposeful about choosing to celebrate even our little wins, it's like our brain doesn't recognize the wins.
Well, and you mentioned the negative, and that makes me think of feelings too. Like we are so eager to notice our negative feelings, but we don't notice our positive feelings. And I'm sure I've told the story before, but I was getting coached in scholars when I was still part of self-coaching scholars. For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, Tia knows because we're trained in the same coaching school. And I was getting coached in scholars, and it was this thing that I was angry, I was sad, I felt violated. Like there was just all this negative emotion going on. And towards the end of the call, she told me, just go and focus on something positive. And I remember walking by my living room window, and there was this really like pretty bird outside the window. And it was just this realization of like, oh, I can have negative and positive feelings at the same time. And so that just, I don't know, it just sparked my brain when you talked about the negative and the positive, because we don't tend to realize that we can have both. And once you concentrate on that, it's just a whole new world.
Absolutely. And I like to think of what we label as positive and negative thoughts and feelings, well, particularly the feelings, but also the thoughts. They're just messengers. When we experience
Mm,
what we would label as a negative thought, like I'm even to the point when I'm speaking about feelings and emotions, I'm learning to change my verbiage. I'm wanting to change my verbiage, and I'm not fully practiced in this yet. But I believe these things are messengers. So is it really a negative or a positive, or is it just something we need to pay attention to? When I'm experiencing what everyone would typically label as a negative emotion, that's an opportunity for me to go, okay, hold on, what is going on here?
yeah.
And to really examine it so that I can then get out of my whatever my spiral's going, and to really get curious about what's going on here and what does this mean to me? Because those
Mm.
feelings are a signal that this means something to you. And when we notice that and pay attention, it's like, oh, now I can choose to accept it or to find the gift in it.
Mm. Say more about finding the gift in it. I think people need to hear more about that.
Yeah, so um, I feel like we're so conditioned to when something happens that we label bad that it's very easy to be in a victim mode, or especially with ADHD, many of us have a comorbidity of depression and anxiety. I
Yeah.
guess that's two, so I said singular, but you know what I'm saying. And it's so easy to get wrapped up in habitual thoughts and habitual feelings as well. And so when I find myself in that space, as soon as I can find myself in awareness, because that too is something we have to train ourselves to, right? Then I can get curious and step back and come from, in positive intelligence, we call what is our sage mind, and start first the curiosity. Okay, what is this signal telling me? And to explore, to innovate, to figure out, okay, how can this help me? So if I'm, for example, if I'm in a situation where I'm feeling very irritable about something because maybe somebody said something or did something, it's an opportunity for me to go, okay, why is this so irritating to me? Actually,
Mm.
this happened to me just the other day. I'll use a real life example.
I was hoping.
Yes. So I was asked to do something for someone, and I like to call myself a recovering people pleaser because I haven't arrived. And I may never arrive fully, but I am improving every day, right? So I I said yes. And then I got irritated that I said yes because it happened to be in my morning time, which usually I like to protect. I have a little morning routine I love to do, and I feel like it sets me up well for the day. This was happening before that routine could be completed, and I'm irritated. And then I had to get curious about why am I so irritated? And I actually found two gifts in it.
Mm.
The first gift was I'm irritated because I didn't protect my time that I want to protect. I rationalized why I would say yes to this thing, right? And it
Mm.
doesn't even matter what
Kind of
that thing.
violated your own rule.
Yeah, I violated my own rule. And so the gift is, okay, I've learned that if I choose to violate my own rule, I will experience feelings that don't really serve me. So now I get to decide, okay, in this instance, was it worth violating my own rule? And in that instance, I actually came to the conclusion that it was, because I hadn't spent much time with this person lately and I really wanted to reconnect with them. But in the moment that I'm feeling irritated because I'm not getting to finish that morning routine, I'm not thinking about that connection piece, right? So then it was a piece of, oh, actually, my mind is telling me this isn't what I want, and it's a lie because I really did want this connection. And sometimes I'm able to come back later and complete my routine. Sometimes I'm not. But it was a signal to me to pay attention to what's important to me and not just listen to the first message my mind is telling me, right?
Yeah.
Because I could have been mad all day.
Yeah. Say more about the people pleasing. I have a few clients that are really struggling with people pleasing, and I would
Mm.
love to hear like your journey as far as being a recovering people pleaser now.
Yeah. So for many people in a neurodivergent or neurotypical, um, as children, we're taught, we're told no, we're taught that we have to obey. And there's nothing wrong with that. Obedience in children can save their life at times. But what happens is we start to always look outside of ourselves and for
Mhm.
what we should do. I put should in quotes, air quotes, because I don't think anybody should on themselves, but we do it all the time. And some at some point we become adults and we want to look at what we've been doing as far as agreeing to things. Because what I found for my own personal self is I was constantly feeling like I needed to say yes to things. And it took me quite some time to realize it was tied to an inner self worth issue. I grew
Mm.
up in a household where I learned, whether this was intentionally taught or not, I learned that my self-worth was tied to what I do. Okay.
Me too.
Versus
Yeah.
having that inherent, I'm just worthy because I live and breathe and am.
Mhm.
And that's really challenging to let go of. I mean, first you got to even be aware that's a thing for you, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's not something that you can snap your fingers and it goes away instantly. So, what I'm working on now is before answering automatically, which ADHD, we're impulsive, right? So sometimes the answer comes out of my mouth before I realize, what did I just say? So I'm learning to pause before jumping in on an answer. And it can be as
Mm.
simple as, okay, I need to check my calendar, or I've got a big project going on. Let me have some time to consider if I can fit this in or not. And even then, it can still be challenging to come back and say, this isn't going to work out for me, but thank you for the invitation. Um,
Yeah.
because I love all the people and I want to be there for all the people. But the reality is, I can't be everything for everyone, right?
Yeah. And putting in that pause is so huge. That
It
is anything impulsive. I'm always teaching my clients ways to put in a pause.
Absolutely. And it's particularly, I have found when I practice that, I actually feel better about my life. Not because it changed anything about my self worth, but it was me coming to a realization that I'm important as the other person is important, right?
Mhm.
And I don't have to always put the other person's importance ahead of mine. There are times when I choose to do that because it's what I choose to do, because I'm maybe honoring them in some way. But also, I got to leave space for honoring myself. And that's challenging when you've grown up as a people pleaser because you felt like I had to say yes. I had to meet other people's expectations so that I appeared to be a good girl, or I'm doing the right thing, put that in air quotes, right thing.
I
Um,
feel like that's 90% of my coaching is I'm not doing it right
oh, yeah. As
as
if
far as
there,
me getting coached.
yeah, well, as if I have a friend that tells me, there's no right or wrong. And
Mm.
at first I'm like, what? Yes, there is. There absolutely is. And it's really kind of boils down to when you're making a decision. I'm not talking morally speaking, but when it comes to making a decision, as long as you are okay with the consequences of your decision,
Mm.
that's what's important.
Yeah.
You can make a decision one day and then the next day go, I don't like I made that decision and I'm changing my mind. And that is okay, you know?
I love that. It sounds like you've been on a bit of a journey of self-love, as I have. I had in self-coaching scholars, I had, I can't remember her name right now, but she was like one of the older coaches and kind of like grandmotherly age.
Mm.
And I came to her with this big problem. I felt like it was a huge problem. And I explained it all to her and how I was feeling about it. And she said, I don't care about that. And I was like, oh, okay. You know, you don't usually get that in coaching. And she went on to explain, she's like, I think the problem that you're really having is you're not loving yourself.
Mm.
And I started bawling because that was absolutely true. And I didn't even really know at the time what that meant. So, but it sounds like you've been on a bit of a journey with that. So tell us about your self-love journey.
Yeah. Well, I think that goes back to being tied with this belief that somehow my self-worth was tied to my doing. And as someone with ADHD, I'm not always doing.
Right.
Sometimes I have had enough and I might sit on the couch and I am done. Or maybe I'll go take a nap, whatever it is.
I love that you're saying that because you're making it okay for other people by
Well,
saying that.
it is okay. It's okay to do what our body and mind need. And the challenge is most of us were taught that wasn't a thing for us as a child. We
Yeah.
were, you know, maybe shamed or judged because we didn't do the thing that the neurotypical child did. Like I even asked my mother, I said, I have always loved naps, haven't I? And she's like, yep. I said, I never fought naps. She said, nope. Whereas, a lot of children fight naps because life is new and bright and wonderful. And we want to be doing, doing, doing. And I'm like, sign me up for the nap. I am down. Um, but I had to first become aware that I had a self-worth issue, thinking
Mm.
my self-worth was somehow tied to something outside of me. And until I got to that realization, I couldn't actually practice love. I still remember somebody talking about before you can fully love others, you have to love yourself. And I'm like, because I don't really like myself, but boy, I sure love all the people around me. And, then you hear yourself say that and you're like, what did I just say? That
Yeah.
is insanity. Why would you not love yourself?
I can't remember his name right now. I wish I could. I want to give him credit. But I saw him, I've seen him talk about this before, so I should know his name, but I don't. But he was on Drew Barrymore's show, and he said, "You are your human. You've been given a human to take care of and to love, and you are your human. How do you want to handle that?" And I just think of like, I have three children. I never want them to feel like I don't love them, but I'll certainly make myself feel like I don't love me
Yeah.
and think nothing about it.
Yeah. And how crazy is that? I saw that clip too, by the way, and I thought it was
Yeah.
genius because the way he led into it, you didn't know he was talking about you at first. He's like, imagine you're given a human, and he kind of describes it. And so, you're kind of buying into it. And then he drops the bomb of you were given a human, it's you. And it's like,
Yeah.
what? Yeah, I was. And most of us would never treat our best friend, our child, a significant other, if you have one, most of us would never treat them the way we treat ourselves.
And they're a separate human being that you don't know what's going on inside their head necessarily, especially with children. Um, and you're just always just trying to do the best you can. But with you, you know exactly what's going on inside your head. And you know exactly what you need usually, or you're on your way to it. I always say the right tools, resources, and people come into my life at the right time. And I kind of heard that from you a little bit earlier. And yeah, like you know what's going on inside you. You know what to do. It's just a matter of doing it or allowing yourself, kind of what you were alluding to, allowing yourself to give yourself what you need and love yourself. So what's been the biggest tool as far as your self-love journey?
That's an excellent question. My mind immediately said, well, that's challenging for me because I feel like all the tools blend together to create
Mm,
what I'm experiencing. And I have some tools that I have great intentions of practicing that I don't practice all of the time. So maybe I do my best to not go a day without meditation, even if it's a short something. I normally, because I have the ability to do this, I normally adjust my schedule so that I can do a full, like a 40-minute meditation in the morning. It's a guided meditation. I have not ever practiced a 40-minute meditation that wasn't guided, so I can't say what I would do. I've done 15 minutes, but I feel like when I do practice that because it gives my mind a moment to be more settled than typical, that in those moments, sometimes I come up with epiphanies. I come up with, what I call aha moments
yeah.
about myself. Sometimes it's regarding a client or a friend, but they always seem so profound. And it's kind of taught me that because when I started out with these meditations, my mind would offer, you don't have time for this. And
You should be doing something else.
you should be doing something else. You've got this
Yeah.
long to-do list. What are you doing? You don't have time. And that's a big story I have in my life. And I've my father once told me, you have all the time there is. And I was in college at the time and he told me that and I wanted to slap him.
You have all the time there is. I've dealt with a lot of clients that are working with what I call time scarcity.
Yeah,
And that means they're always feeling like they don't have time and they're always kind of chasing their tail. And I'm trying to slow them down and help them manage the time that they actually have rather
yeah.
than this fairy tale, you know. system
Well,
time.
there's two reasons for that, in my opinion. This is just my opinion, and people can choose to disagree with it. But for one, at least for myself, my personal experience, I was taught that I wasn't doing enough. And so therefore that creates a time story.
Yeah.
And also because our brains don't work the way a neurotypical brain works, it takes so much more energy for us at times to do certain things that seem natural and normal to a neurotypical brain, that because it takes more time, we learn that we are somewhat quote unquote behind a neurotypical person. And I mean, sure, but also we have a different experience, and maybe it's our journey to not do it in that time frame. But now we've learned there's a time frame and we're not measuring up.
Yeah, a major thought of mine before coaching was that's going to take forever.
Mm,
No matter what it was, I always told myself, hey, that's going to take forever. And what I started doing was just timing how long those things actually took. And then I like challenged that story of that's
yeah,
going to take forever when that thing actually takes 6 minutes instead of the hour that I thought it would take. Because when we're telling that story of like, that's going to take forever, now we're avoiding the thing.
yep.
And now it's probably compounding on itself. And when you finally get around to it, it will take forever. And so
Oh,
you are just telling, our thoughts are always related to our results. And so you're just making it true.
yeah. Well, and it feels like forever because that tab has been running in the back of our mind the whole day while we've been avoiding the thing. So it
Or
does feel
days.
like
Yeah.
forever. Yeah. I was trying not to call myself out on that, man. But what? Oh, okay. But it's true. It
But
does feel like forever. And timing yourself is a great practice.
yeah. And so I want to talk a little bit more about your doing nothing, is what I would call it. Like, sitting on the couch and just vegging out or whatever. There are some clients I work with where I'm like, I want you to just do nothing. And they start negotiating with me. Well, I can bring a notepad, right? And I'm like, no, nothing. You're going to just do nothing. And what I'm doing there, there's a method to my madness, but what I'm doing there is I want them to come back the next session and tell me, oh, I realized that I'm uncomfortable doing nothing because of this. And that's what happened is I had one client come back to me. I'm just thinking she's the perfect example for this. But she came back to me and she's like, "Oh, when I was a kid, if I was doing nothing and my mom found out, she would give me something to do." And so she was never allowed to just be. She would actually hide under tables and to like just, read a book or just relax. And as an adult, it made her a person that just couldn't just chill and do nothing. And our energy levels are so, what's the word I'm looking for? They're just not, you can't depend on your energy levels. I don't know
Mm,
the word that I'm missing there, but you don't really know day to day what your energy levels are going to be like as a person with ADHD.
yeah, absolutely. Because there's so much that plays into that. I mean, not just biologically, but like I mentioned, the tabs running in the background.
Mhm.
Typically, we have like a computer, and you're on the internet, and you got this tab and this tab and this tab because you followed a trail, and now you've got 15 tabs open. We do that in our minds too when we don't address something, especially if we're avoiding or procrastinating. And I know for myself that I struggle to practice doing nothing. Well, let me rephrase that. I could do the nothing, but then I would shame, blame, and judge myself
Mm.
because I was told as a child, because I enjoyed reading. That was my escapism from my life. Library books,
Me
you
too.
guys,
Yeah.
but like your client, if I didn't seem to be productive, and sometimes it's like, okay, summertime, parents are at work. What am I going to do? Oh, I'm reading this book, right? And then suddenly I look at the clock. I'm like, oh no, dad's going to be home in 10 minutes. And my room is not clean. So what am I doing? I'm like opening my dresser drawer. I'm shoving all the things in the dresser drawer and shoving the thing and putting things under the bed. And I wasn't fooling anyone. And I did get in trouble for that. But then I got a story that I was lazy
Mm.
because I was hyper focusing elsewhere. I wasn't actually paying attention to what was required of me. And I don't know that if I had done the required thing first and then me reading, I don't know that the story really would have been that different. Because I think a lot of the generation before mine, it was, they had a belief system that, oh, there's a phrase now, I can't remember, idle hands are the devil's plaything or something. So
Yeah.
it's, if you're not busy doing something, it's an opportunity for you to get in trouble.
Yeah.
So now we've learned we're not allowed time to ourselves.
And we've talked so much about worthiness. And an example that I use when I'm talking to clients is, everybody has that homeless person in their town, right? And I'm like, what about the man that sits by the freeway? Like, what is he really doing? What is he contributing? And they're like, nothing. And I'm like, well, is he a valuable human being? And they're like, absolutely. Okay. So when you do nothing, are you a valuable human being? And that's hard for people.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going to steal that. I think that's a perfect analogy because we need something concrete to help our minds make sense of it's okay to take time for ourselves, whether we want to do nothing at all, whether we want to watch a show, read a book, paint, whatever it is. We get to have that time.
Yeah. And what did you say earlier? Shame, blame, and judge. Is that what it was?
Shame, blame, and judgment. Yep, yep. The
Shame, blame,
SBJ.
and that is what we can tend to do as we're taking that time and then not enjoy it
Yeah.
to the degree that we would normally enjoy it.
Mhm.
And I know you talked about like, that was not your family's intentions, but you like ended up with this story of like time scarcity. For me, what I realized when I was getting coached was I came from a family where you had to work hard and everybody
Mhm.
was hard workers and they were so valued for being hard workers. And that's all wonderful, right? But I took it as things have to be hard in
Mhm.
order for me to deserve them. And where during coaching where I realized this was I had just gotten a brand new car and I had never had a brand new car before. I was being practical, right? And I'm like, I'm going to get a used car and I always heard like as soon as you drive it off the lot, it like loses its
What's
value.
its
And
value?
exactly. And so I always had used cars and I got a brand new car. And I just remember like not looking at it. I would go out to the car and I would just kind of like not look at it. And as I was driving the car, I was just like looking where I was going. I didn't like look around the car. And I realized that I got that car so easily
Mhm.
that I felt like I didn't deserve it. And
Wow.
so that's kind of back to that worthiness. Unless it's
Yeah.
hard, you're not worthy of it.
Yeah. And that goes back to the whole self-love. I mean,
Yeah.
worthiness is not something anyone has to earn. We're just worthy by the fact that we're alive and living and breathing, right? And
Mhm.
and I don't think that message has been spread far and wide yet. And
Yeah.
so I like to tell people it's like love is always the answer. I truly believe love is always the answer. And it starts with us loving ourselves because when you can love yourself, that's when your cup can spill over. I'm
Yeah.
many people, I mean, I just had this experience in life where I'd given and given and given so much, there was nothing left for me. And that put me in a state of burnout. And then I was good for no one, not myself, not my family, you know. But when we start with loving ourselves first, now what we're practicing for ourselves can spill over onto the people around us.
That's so true. And I just think of that difficult person that everybody has in their life. I
Yeah.
guarantee you that difficult person does not love themselves.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. And they're judging themselves probably all the time.
Yeah, way more than they're judging anyone else.
Yeah.
And I have someone in my life that's like that. And I've told like friends and family that comment on this person, I'm like, that they don't realize that they're like that, right? And that they are talking to themselves in a worse way than is coming out of their mouths. And
Yeah.
so that really, I think that helps people understand and be empathetic of
Yeah.
people that are having challenges like that. But
Well,
yeah, go
well, can
ahead.
I just add one more thing?
Yes, please.
I mean, if you think about when you're having your worst day ever, because we never know what's going on in somebody else's head. And so I just have a belief that, and I'm not perfect at it. I'll be the first to admit I'm not perfect because I never will be perfect. I'm human. But I like to practice kindness, particularly if I'm feeling crappy myself, because I know what it's like to hurt and be in pain. And everyone around us, we're all made up of our past experiences. And
Mm,
so when I think about the wrongs that my dad did to me, we'll say, my dad went through Vietnam. My
mm,
dad was from an era where if you even had an inkling that you were having some kind of mental health difficulty, you did not mention it. It was so stigmatized. And I just use him as an example because it just shows that every single person on the planet has a past, has past experiences that have spoken into their lives. And a lot of people don't have the tools that we have to help
yeah,
themselves through that journey, you know? And so if you think about that, why would we be unkind to the person who's not being kind to us? Like people want to make it a deserving thing. Well, you don't deserve it because whatever. Well, what about the days I don't really deserve it? Those are the days I need the kindness the most, you know?
yeah.
And
That
so,
was me yesterday.
yeah, girl. Was it something in the air? I'm not sure. But you know, that's why it's like, let's change our perspective. Let's realize that other people have those days too. And some of the people, they're living a life of that, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So well said.
kindness and love.
You mentioned like love is always the answer that you tell that to your clients. Like, can you give us an example of some way that that made a difference?
Um, so in particular, I have a couple, and you know, when we're going through hard times, as this couple is, and I'm sure anybody who has a significant other has experienced going through hard times. And this couple particularly has had a rough few years. And it's so easy to get caught up in finger pointing. I mean, I do it um, where I'm so into my story that I'm not really thinking about their perspective or their experience. And there's sometimes we do need to hold somebody accountable. So I'm not saying we discount that, but to stop and pause and go, love is always the answer. So where's love missing here? You know, and it
Mm,
might be missing in a place of understanding. It might be missing from the perspective that this person is still growing, you know. And in this
yeah.
case, I'm like, congratulations, he signed up with you. Like, that's huge to get your spouse, whether it's him or her, whomever, to get your spouse to be like, you're right. We need some outside help to learn some tools to work on a relationship so we can have a more solid family. And then to show up, that seems to some people so little, but it's really so big. And to
Mhm.
be able to celebrate something like that, to me, is coming from a place of love. Let's celebrate the fact that you showed up together. Let's celebrate the fact that although you had this argument, um, you just haven't learned all the tools yet, or you haven't gained enough awareness yet. It's a journey. So let's celebrate the fact that you're on a journey and together. And when you can come from that place of love, that's when you can see that something outside of the victimhood or the avoider, the complaining, and all of that. Not that there isn't a place for any of that, because there is, and we need to be heard. And then once we have found that space, then to say, okay, where does love fit in here?
Yeah. I love how that circles back around because ADHD conversations always circle back around, but that circles back around to like the small wins, right? Like finding the small wins with a partner in this example. Although I would say showing up to coaching as a couple is no small win. That's a big
Exactly, right? That was, I mean, some people saw it as, oh, what's the big deal? He showed up. You know, when
yeah.
anybody would do that, and you know, and at that point I go, yeah, he showed up and participated.
And how many people like refuse therapy because they're afraid the person on the other end is going to take or tell them that they're wrong. I
Well, and
think
it
that
goes back to judgment. They're busy judging themselves and they don't want to hear it from somebody else too, you know.
yeah.
even though that's not what we do, but they don't know that if they've never experienced it.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, Tia, thank you for being here. I appreciate having this conversation. Where can people find you?
So my website is coachwithtia.com, and they can even sign up for my, I call it's called Focus Forward. I call it a newsletter, but is it a newsletter? I don't know. It's information. Sometimes I'll throw out what I'm doing or tips, and just a place to connect, and which will be the beginning of a hub I'm going to start soon. So I look forward to meeting all the people.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you again for coming and having this conversation.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I feel honored to have the opportunity to do this with you today.